our next topic. So
glad to be helpful.
So yeah, so let's take a step back, and you've been in this sector for a little while. You've seen changes in the US, what it looks like, politics, economics and whatever. And now we have this crazy pandemic. So that's, like, I never saw that coming. I don't know about you, but whatever. And then, but finally, we're starting to have what I would say a racial reckoning too. So we're starting, foundations and even corporations are starting to recognize and see people of color and see them as leaders and see them and hold them up, and provide funding, God forbid, for BIPOC-led organizations and et cetera. So let's start there, and I'd love to hear any reflections that you have on what's going on with some of the racial reckoning in the US as you see it with organizations.
Right. Well, I can tell you that the insurance industry is, in my experience, one of the least progressive and most restricted in terms of both women and people of color. So,
and God forbid you're like a woman of color or a trans person of color, and so you just have like things just stacked against you. Although folks thrive, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but yes,
no,
so
but I mean, so I'm, my world is the nonprofit sector,
correct,
but I'm also having to live in this insurance space,
right?
And the dichotomy is just dramatic.
Yeah.
I think this best is described through one example that I'll give you. This happened before COVID.
Okay.
But it was. We heard that the broker brought to us Black Lives Matter, right?
We've all heard of BLM, and
right? And so we were like, yeah, of course, let's underwrite this, let's talk, let's work it through. But what we learned from the broker is that that Black Lives Matter had been declined by 90 insurance companies.
What?
Just 90 insurance companies just said, we will not insure them because of who they are. So think about what this means. If you are a nonprofit, you can't get insurance. You can't lease or own a building.
Fundraise.
You can't fundraise. You can't get board members. You can't operate. This is a serious concern for us with the nonprofit sector.
Reel back the tape for a second. So 90 insurance providers said no to Black Lives Matter organization, and we can talk about like at another time
90 insurance
what organization it really is, and underneath, and there's different chapters and all of that. That's crazy. Did they hear why they were denied? Was it because of advocacy, or was it a racial thing, or like what were the reasons 90 insurance providers said no? That is crazy
question. They don't necessarily provide an answer, but I will tell you that what we have seen now over the course of the last couple of years is that advocacy is the code word for civil justice, right? We don't insure advocacy organizations, is what those who want to decline say. They decline based on advocacy organizations.
So, but so many nonprofits provide advocacy services.
Yes, they do. But we're having a lot of nonprofits coming to us saying our carriers don't want to insure us anymore because we're advocacy.
So, I'm sorry. So if you're an organization out there that provides advocacy services, which half of them do,
right?
One could say, what you're saying, so they should, if they don't have services and they're not a NIAC or NIA member, then they should say civil justice?
No, because I think what I'm saying is that civil justice organizations are being declined because they say that they don't, the insurance companies say they don't insure advocacy organizations.
Right.
So I don't think it's it's not up to the nonprofit to figure out what they say, and they have to be truthful.
Yeah, of course.
But I think that's what's happening. So I just think it's frightening because we see all these wonderful organizations starting and the existing organizations, and it's way under the radar screen of most people to say that if you can't get insurance, you can't operate. I mean, that is why I am so dedicated to the mission that we're doing. It's not
Right.
very glamorous,
Right.
but we are the backbone so that nonprofits can actually do what they need to do and not be in danger of not being able to operate because they can't get the insurance they need.
And so just going back to BIPOC organizations or organizations, do you have any trends or data on what challenges BIPOC-led organizations are facing, or is it more challenging? I would suspect maybe not to get insurance, or are they smaller? Are they larger? Like, are you seeing any trends?
Well, certainly they tend to be smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And we know because of discrimination, access to BIPOC folks is restricted and has been,
Right.
for centuries. So,
Right.
and I think that there are some in the funding community, certainly, that are trying to figure out how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I still feel like it's way beyond time for funders and other organizations to just give them money and stop with all of the, what are you going to do with it and how are you going to use it? I mean, I sometimes laugh. We welcome, I don't know, about 2,500 new nonprofits every year. That means we have to do the application process of thousands every year.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a huge staff, 140, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're issuing minimum of $1 million policies on each of these organizations. How much harder is that than evaluating a grant proposal?
Okay, well, so hang on a second. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Pamela Davis has a magic wand. And
Oh, you haven't seen that?
I haven't. I'd love to see it. So or you're in charge of a very large foundation.
Right.
What changes would you make? What would that look like?
Well, if you look at what happens in the venture funding world, where somebody has a great idea and that person is going to really do a fabulous job, let's give them millions, right? That never happens, almost never happens in the nonprofit world, right? So what I would say is foundations need to get out of their own way. And why did they continue to think that they know more about the operations of an organization, of a nonprofit, than someone who is actually doing the work, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like they actually put their frame on top of this work and mold it in such a way that is less efficient and less successful, because they don't allow the people in the field to just get the money and do it the way they need to get the work done.
Okay, but in defense of foundations too, that there needs to be some evaluation, because otherwise, or criteria, otherwise you would have a trillion organizations, knocking at your door. So how do you, reckon that?
Well, you absolutely can hold people accountable for specific agreed on outcomes.
Sure.
But what I'm suggesting is that you agree on what outcomes you want, and the entrepreneur or the head of the nonprofit sector, the nonprofit organization, either is able to accomplish those or not. And you can hold people accountable based on that. But when you interfere and say, oh, I know you want to do it this way, but we think it should be done that way, and then you are frustrated because the outcomes have not gotten to be what you want, then that to me is a problem. I mean, you either trust the leadership and hold them accountable, of course, for that agreement, but allow them to do what needs to get done, right? And because so many nonprofits have the funding is like, oh, I can spend this over here, but not over here, and I have to account for that.
Well, I think the foundation code word, or it's characterized as general operating support.
Yes.
US, right? Like, so you just want unrestricted gen op support, and
that's correct.
This organization know best. You run your organization, rock it, and so you would. It sounds like you would the change you would make the next day of this trillion-dollar foundation is to do Gen Ops support.
Absolutely, and longer term, not just 1 year, not just 2 years, probably 5 years.
Yeah.
I think that the scrutiny would be upfront on the individual or the group of leaders that say, we can do this, see what the track record is. And once you're convinced this is the team that can do it, then get out of their way.
Yeah.
You know, certainly have reports, but not try to do the work for them or influence how it should be done.